What a week this has been, right? I mean, this is supposed to be the dog days of summer, heading into the 4th of July, nobody paying attention to politics, Washington sort of beside the point. Yeah, right. Not this week. I mean, Congress was even in session today. They passed this big highway bill that nobody thought they'd be able to pass. As part of that, they passed the student loans thing, so everybody with student loans will not see their rates double as of next week. They brought that one down to the wire, but they finally did it. President Obama today was in Colorado, where that state is suffering through the worst wildfires in its history, wildfires that have killed 2 people already and that are threatening built-up population centers like Colorado Springs. The Supreme Court ruling yesterday, of course, on health reform has Democrats and Republicans, liberals and conservatives, frankly, still vibrating at a very high pitch, still reacting to the enormity of that ruling, but also still scrambling to figure out what the implications of it are going to be in policy and, of course, in politics, not least in the presidential campaigns. In the midst of the political pandemonium after that epic decision yesterday morning, Republicans in the House of Representatives voted to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress for the first time in American history. And nobody noticed. One Republican congressman went on Fox this morning and proverbially jumped up and down trying to get more attention to this thing that did not get that much attention. He said on Fox today that congressional Republicans might very well try to have the Attorney General arrested. Arrested? Really? These are supposedly the dog days. Other than being hot, though, these are not the dog days. We are in top gear. And in politics, that means that really the campaigns ought to be hitting on all cylinders. I mean, think about the big picture here for the presidential campaign. There are very few unknowns left. Obviously, we know who the candidates are. We know what the main issues are going to be. The other shoe has now dropped in terms of what health care is going to mean for the campaign now. Yes, there is the vice presidential pick for Mr. Romney. But other than that, the candidates know what they need to do. And by now, they ought to know what they're doing. They've been doing it a while. They should have sort of worked out the kinks. Can you tell where I'm going with this? Kinks remain. There seems to be one particularly kinky part of the Mitt Romney for President campaign that they just cannot fix. They keep doing it over and over and over again wrong. They keep blowing it. I think they should stop doing this.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining the Obama's Failed Foreign Policy Conference Call. Your host for today, Amanda Henneberg, will now begin.
Hey guys, it's Amanda from the campaign. Thanks so much for getting on the call.
The Romney campaign does these conference calls all the time. The Candle in the Wind Muzak one there was one of their conference calls in April, the Obama's Failed Foreign Policy Conference Call. They called that one specifically to rebut an allegation from Vice President Biden that Mitt Romney's foreign policy was going to be just like the George W. Bush foreign policy. And you can tell that because all the Romney foreign policy advisors are former Bush advisors. That was the allegation. And the Romney campaign called this Candle in the Wind, Muzak-themed conference call to rebut that allegation. To rebut the allegation that all their foreign policy advisors are Bush guys. And 2 of the 3 speakers they booked for that call to make that case that they're not full of George W. Bush foreign policy advisors. 2 of those 3 guys are George W. Bush foreign policy advisors. They're bad at this. They're bad at doing this conference call political strategy thing. A week later, the RNC held another one of these things, specifically to go after President Obama on high unemployment in the United States. Hey, Obama, how come there are no jobs in the United States? That particular conference call, they routed through a conference call center in the Philippines. The all-time great one of these, though, was probably in April. The Romney campaign held a conference call specifically on women and the economy. This is when they were pushing back on the whole war on women thing. And their pushback, you remember, was, well, Obama has horrible policies on women and the economy. They picked out a very specific target that really gave them something specific to shoot at. I mean, the first policy President Obama signed into law was on women and the economy. It was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act about women and what they get paid in the workforce. The Romney campaign calls a conference call to attack President Obama on those policies. When they get asked about that policy on the conference call they called to discuss that policy, here was their response.
Our next question will come from Sam Stein with Huffington Post. Please go ahead.
Yeah, does Governor Romney support the Lilly Ledbetter Act?
And we'll get back to you on that.
The pregnant pause heard round the world. The day after that, trying to do damage control, the Romney campaign held another conference call specifically to make clear that Mitt Romney totally supports fair pay for women. Do not be confused here. Do not be misled by Democratic spin or some unfortunate gaffe on a conference call. Of course Mitt Romney supports fair pay for women. Well, the people who the Romney campaign lined up to make that case for him were 2 members of Congress who voted against the Fair Pay Act for women. They are bad at this. You know, they don't have to use this tactic. Why do they keep using it when it's like their Achilles heel? It's like their curse. Do you remember the one back in May when they lined up a Florida congressman to stump for Mitt Romney on one of these conference calls, specifically on Florida issues? Apparently not realizing that that particular Florida congressman had been under investigation by the FBI, the IRS, the Miami-Dade Police Department Public Corruption Unit, the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And people in Florida tended to know that about him. At the last minute before the call, all of a sudden, that troubled Florida congressman was suddenly unavailable to join that call due to what they said were scheduling reasons or something. You would think that they would just stop doing this particular thing, but they are still doing them. A couple of weeks ago when President Obama announced his big change in immigration policy, the big problem for the Romney campaign on that was that they would not say whether Mr. Romney agreed with that policy or not. So yes, we know you hate everything President Obama does, but do you hate this particular thing the president has done? Do you hate that policy? What is your policy on the subject? Now, the whole point of the Romney campaign at this point is to never get specific on policy. And so they desperately wanted to avoid being subject to any reporters' questions on that. At that time, when immigration policy was all anybody wanted to talk about, and they did not have a policy that they wanted to talk about. So a couple of days after President Obama made his immigration announcement, the Romney folks called a conference call, and they futilely tried to insist that nobody would be allowed to ask them questions about immigration policy. Romney aides repeatedly urged reporters to restrict their questions to economic topics. After reporters did not oblige, the Romney campaign cut off the call. Yeah, who could have seen that coming? I don't know why they don't recognize this as a problem they have. I mean, they may be able to do a lot of other things, but they cannot do this. I, for example, cannot say the word procurement. I also have trouble with the word sixth. I can say a lot of other words, but I cannot say those 2 words without slowing down and trying really hard. And so I have learned to talk about even the concepts of things being between the 5th thing and the 7th thing, and a particular policy about buying things without ever making myself say the words procurement or sixth. If you know you're bad at something, stop doing it. Stop doing these conference calls. They're not stopping doing these conference calls. The Republicans did another one of them today on the health reform ruling. Want to guess how it went?
There's only one candidate, Governor Romney, who's committed that he will repeal the Obamacare tax increase.
The Obamacare. Yeah. This is a pro-Mitt Romney conference call where Governor Bobby Jindal of Louisiana reminded everybody on a phone line paid for by the Republicans that Obamacare and Romneycare can be conveniently combined into the Tim Pawlenty trademarked epithet Obamnicare.
President Obama said that he designed Obamacare after Romneycare and basically made it Obamnicare.
Remember, that's sort of how Tim Pawlenty got out of the presidential race this year. He had coined this thing, Obamacare, saying that what Mitt Romney did in Massachusetts is pretty much exactly what President Obama had introduced for national health reform policy. That happens to be true. Having coined Obamacare on the campaign trail, though, Mr. Pawlenty declined to repeat that slur to Mr. Romney's face at a debate, thus leaving him open to the wuss allegation that he had tried so hard to counteract with a lot of talk about hockey fights. But the Obamacare epithet, which was used by Bobby Jindal accidentally on a pro-Romney conference call today, and which was used by Tim Pawlenty while he was still in the presidential race, that was a powerful slur, a powerful idea against Mr. Romney in the Republican primaries, when candidates could really count on the base super hating the idea of health reform.
Pick any other Republican in the country. He is the worst Republican in the country to put up against Barack Obama.
Politically speaking, on health reform, which is what Mr. Santorum says he was talking about there, Rick Santorum is right. The Massachusetts plan that Mitt Romney put in place is exactly the same as what President Obama did at the national level on every substantive element. And that has been the big political complication for Republicans this year in nominating Mr. Romney in the first place. But now it is a particular mess for the Republicans because after the Supreme Court ruling yesterday, the Romney side, the Republican side, is saying they are now going to double down on making this year's presidential race all about how awful health reform is. The health reform that's exactly the same as what Mitt Romney did. The whole basic plan that everybody, or at least almost everybody, gets health insurance, it's the same thing between the two plans. Romney Care is already in effect in Massachusetts. Nearly 100% of Massachusetts kids are insured now. 98% of the overall population in the state is insured. And that's what national health reform would be trying to do, too, if it gets implemented. The whole idea of the mandate, where you have to get health insurance, and if you don't, you have to pay a fee or pay a tax or whatever you want to call it, that's exactly the same in Massachusetts as it would be at the federal level. Here's Mitt Romney's op-ed from 2009 saying, yep, you have to pay a tax if you choose not to buy health insurance in Massachusetts. It's exactly the same thing that just got upheld by the Supreme Court yesterday for the whole country. Everything that they want to say is evil and tyrannical about Obamacare is the exact same brand of supposed evil tyranny in Romney Care. Or the exact same brand of good idea, if you want to look at it that way. Having Mitt Romney run for president against health reform is nuts. And that's what they say they're going to do now. But that would be like having Barack Obama run for president by being against killing Osama bin Laden or being against ending the war in Iraq. You did it. You're going to run against it? This whole renewed freakout on the right, them saying they're going to make the whole election against health reform with Mitt Romney as their standard bearer, is bizarre. But don't take it from me. Who am I? Just a liberal on TV. Perhaps you'd take it from the guy who was the architect of the Mitt Romney healthcare plan in Massachusetts, who President Obama then hired to come to Washington and write roughly the same plan for the whole country. In November, he got asked about how that Republican and bipartisan plan in Massachusetts that he worked on ended up being such a boogeyman for the Republicans now in running against Obama. Here's his response. It's priceless. Quote, "This is, to my mind, the most blatantly obvious case of politics trumping policy I've ever seen in my life. Because this is an idea that 4 or 5 years ago Republicans were touting. A guy from the Heritage Foundation spoke at the bill signing in Massachusetts about how good this bill was. The guy who wrote both plans for Obama and Romney, this is him here, he said that Romney's attempt to distinguish between Obama's bill and his own is disingenuous. The direct quote from him is this: "The problem is, there is no way to say that, because they're the same effing bill," except he didn't say